good morning and welcome to MSP Studios. We are here live recording our Human Approach to Leadership webinar supported by Bank of New York Mellon. It's really exciting today, actually. I always love a good kickstart to the week, and today we've announced a partnership with Bank of New York Mellon around Northern Power Women, Northern Power Futures, and we've got some really exciting things that we've got planned over the next year. So, and this is the first sort of gathering this morning, and we are going to be talking around a human approach to leadership. We have got hopefully 3 at the moment. We are panelists down, but it's okay, because 3 is a perfect number at this moment in time. So I'm delighted this morning to be joined by Jane Woods from BNY Mellon, and also from the superb Louise Beardmore from United Utilities, who we equally have a fantastic partnership with, and I'll be coming to them in a short while. So this webinar this morning is going to take an hour, and we want to hear from you. We're going to be opening to Q&A at around 11:45. But what a year, and I think we have seen so many different styles and types of leadership throughout this corona coaster that we've all been on, whether it be the presidential election, whether it be government, whether it be Jacinda Ardern. But I think one of the things that we have been talking about over the lockdown period was actually the different traits of leadership. And we're really excited that we're working with Teesside University to produce a piece of research about what those new traits are. And so we wanted today's conversation to look at what is the human approach to leadership. And we know that, leadership has had to change. We suddenly all woke up one morning and we're in a lockdown, in a pandemic, and we're all having to adopt to sort of different styles. How are we dealing with our people at home? How are we dealing with our businesses open to the public? And so, today we're really excited to be joining this, and I am even more delighted that I've just seen Sharon, Amesu, pop up on our screen. So without further ado, I'm going to go over to our brilliant panelists and ask them to just tell us a bit about themselves, because I know they all have such amazingly diverse roles, and also tell us what leadership means to you. So good morning, Jane. Welcome to our webinar this morning. Welcome to MSP Studios.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all doing well on this Monday morning. My goodness, I've had a morning already. So my name is Jane Woods. I have been at BNY Mellon for actually very nearly 3 years. I am responsible for global securities operations in EMEA. That responsibility has with it about 180 people in Manchester and about the same in Brussels. And we're responsible basically for the monitoring of client transactions as a custodian bank. So we have a trade capture element, we have a settlements element, and we also have a corporate actions element. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because, it'll bore you. The bank itself, as many of you will know, is growing quite well in Manchester. It's actually a great institution to work for, and hugely focused on diversity and inclusion. But I think we talk about leadership at the moment. I mean, my leadership responsibilities have grown quite a lot during this pandemic, with quite a larger role. But my goodness, has my leadership style changed quite considerably. Not having people in front of you, ensuring that you stay in contact with people, implementing things like, virtual huddles where we've all got our cameras on and we're all talking, but also very much looking after the mental well-being of our staff. We have all had a lot of challenges over the last few months. And those challenges have been very much, with our children being at home, with challenges around, supporting our families and friends. And I think as a whole, I've seen a huge change in our environment around collaboration and community spirit. I have felt that I've had to changed my style to be probably a little less direct than I was before, but also to ensure that from our perspective that, you know, as I said, you know, that we stay in touch. Leadership, and I think, you know, we're very focused on the business and actually getting the business done, but also we've had to bring a very different element of leadership to our roles this year. You know, and as I said, that talks to the mental well-being, but an understanding. You know, I was very lucky. I had a daughter who was a little bit older, who I didn't have to homeschool. I do not know how I would have managed it had I had younger children and actually had to manage my job along with, you know, also homeschooling and looking after the kids. It's just been a very fluid situation. And as I said, my leadership skills have changed, you know, considerably. You know, I've had to be a lot more flexible. I've had to understand, you know, of marrying up the business versus, you know, the personal challenges that people have had.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you so much. And I always appreciate the whole, you know, with the challenges, but combating them with collaboration and community spirit, I think will get us through. Lou, welcome. Great to see you. Always good to have a chat with Louise. Tell us, what's your name? Where'd you come from? And what's leadership to you, Lou?
Hi, good morning, Simone, and good morning to everybody this morning. My name's Louise Beardmore. I work for United Utilities and I have two roles. The first job I have is I'm a mum and a wife to my daughter who was 18 yesterday. And let me tell you that when I started 2020 and thought about all the great things we had planned, it didn't include an 18th birthday in lockdown. But I'm also customer services and people director here at United Utilities. So I have responsibility for 7 million customers, £2 billion worth of revenue each year, and responsibility to make sure that when you turn the tap on in the morning, you get up for the shower, that water comes out, and more importantly, when you flush the toilet, it goes away. I'm probably one of the only people who's going to join you via video conference like this and say who is what we do and be very, very proud about that. What's really interested in this context of leadership, and you know, Jane's just talked a little bit about it, that is that this world of COVID has really meant that we've had to look at ourselves, has meant that we've had to use different types of leadership skills, and probably some that we've never ever really tested before. And if you think about the context of what we do, we're an essential service, we're a key worker, but it's really quite interesting because people don't think of their water services in that way. So when we think about key workers, we think about the fantastic services that are provided, whether that be through the NHS or the police. We perhaps don't think about our utility workers who are working 24 hours a day, round the clock, to keep our essential services flowing, and equally putting themselves into difficult and dangerous situations too. You know, Nightingale hospitals had to be built, but actually we also needed to get water and wastewater infrastructure at the same time as we're in and out of everybody's properties, and also working on all of our operational sites to make sure that the product that we all take for granted is still there and still provided. And I think if we think about this sort of sense of leadership, I remember when I got my first leadership role, and way back then, leadership was almost defined by when you hit a certain grade, it was known as a leadership grade. So it was almost you joined and you worked really, really hard to achieve that grade, and almost that sense of, I'm now a leader. And I think over the years, I think what I've really understood is that leadership is actually not about a title. It's not about a grade, it's not about a position that you may have. It's actually about action, and it's actually about example. And it's the actions that you take day in, day out, and the examples that you set that actually define your role as a leader and whether people are willing to follow you. And I often talk about my role as a leader essentially is there to unblock. And to use that sort of water analogy, as soon as though we're on it, you know, it's either a sense of setting that new direction and laying those new pipes, or essentially taking away those blockages. And my role as a leader is simply there, not to lead. It's about actually how am I empowering others, and actually how am I helping them to deliver what they need to deliver and to enable themselves to be successful. And I think from a leadership perspective, now more than ever, of all the years that I've been in work, has there been the coming together of the home life, and Jane just mentioned it there in terms of people having to homeschool, the complexity of care, the complexity of the economic challenges that COVID presents, as well as the social challenges, all combining with what we all do professionally for our jobs too. And so our role as a leader is actually no longer about what we do 8 till 6. It's actually about leading people's whole being and recognizing that actually the roles that people have outside of their core job and the impacts that COVID is having is as much an instrumental part as how we lead during the day-to-day. So many thanks for asking me to be part of the session. It's a great opportunity and really nice to kick something off on a Monday morning, which is upbeat and positive, which is, I think, something that we all need.
Thanks, Lou. Thank you. And happy birthday to your daughter. I hope you managed to have a good 18th birthday celebration yesterday. But in true tradition, it should at least go on for the next month, surely.
Well, listen, we went big on balloons, we went big on cake. And do you know what? As a mum, I really reflected that actually, had she been 18, I'm sure she'd have been out with her girlfriends hitting the cocktails. And actually, what was really nice was I got her all to myself. So actually, there was a little bit when I drove to work this morning that sort of said, do you know what? There are some upsides to COVID. Actually, if we really think and delve hard enough, there are some real upsides. So yeah, I secretly loved yesterday. And a bit like the Queen, we've got a birthday party in reserve. So there's another second birthday definitely happening.
Absolutely, yeah. And it it really resonates what you say. It's not about leadership. It's not about the title. It's about the actions that you take, and it's the examples that you set. I couldn't agree more. And thirdly, to Sharon, someone who leads by example every day, a true force of nature and a phenomenal role model. Sharon Amesu, welcome to Happy Monday, Uplifting Monday. We're talking about leadership. Welcome. Tell us about you.
Good morning, everyone. It's absolutely delightful to be here. And of course, as always, Simone, to spend time with you. You know that I love to do that. So thank you for this invitation to spend some time with the ladies of the NPW. Reflecting on leadership, it's one of the areas that I'm incredibly passionate about. It's the area that I work in day to day, supporting leaders. As far as who I am, first of all, as Louise was saying, I too am a mum. First and foremost, my biggest vocation. I have a 22-year-old daughter and 2 sons, one's 17 and one's 12. I think one of the most remarkable things about this time under lockdown is that we are still all sane and we are still together. And I think that is the greatest achievement of our times, because none of us have ever spent this amount of time together in one place. So I'm very grateful for that. I'm also, by profession, I'm a criminal barrister, and I was in practice for 16 years before leaving the bar and setting up a consultancy which works with leaders and supports leaders, and also helps organizations with diversity and inclusion initiatives. I'm also the former chair of the Greater Manchester branch of the Institute of Directors, and I have several non-executive director roles, executive director roles. I think when I think about leadership under lockdown, leadership in the wake of COVID, I think very much of leaders being cartographers. So cartographers are those who design maps, they plan maps. And what would often happen is when they were 15th century in particular, 15th century, 16th century map writers, they would come across unknown territory. And when they came across that territory, they'd mark the map with terra incognita, that is unknown territory. And they'd also describe terra incognita as here be dragons. That's the unknown, the really scary territory. And I feel that in so many ways, leaders are leading us through right now times which are the unknown, which are incredibly challenging, that there's just a flood of crisis, there's a flood of questions, there's a flood of confusion and frustration, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, and so on. And so what I feel actually this whole situation is calling us to realize is that our old sort of intellectual antecedents, our organizational antecedents, all of the stuff that anchored us, our knowledge that we used beforehand to help us to navigate new ways forward, actually they can't help us in the same way, because where we are right now, we've never been before. And so I feel that really for leaders, what we have to anchor ourselves in are those traits which are throughout time have stood us in good stead. Traits such as courage. And I feel that right now, leadership is about people who will step in and be courageous. Leadership is about those people who will be resilient in the face of challenges. And I really like this idea as well, Simone, that you're bringing to the table of the humanistic side to leadership and why that's necessary now. And I see very much as we are leading people who are facing real challenges, real issues of uncertainty, navigating the unknown and facing all manner of crises, the ability of the leader to understand that, to connect with each person's individuality and humanity is so key to our survival. I think when I think about leadership, I think about Daniel Goleman and his understanding of those leaders who really do outperform, who become the outliers, are those who really tap into emotional intelligence. They understand themselves well. They understand their own strengths, their own areas of development, but they also understand other people, and they're willing to reach in and lean into other people and hear their stories and connect and engage in order to lead in a way which is relevant. So leadership for me right now is so crucial to us coming through this stronger, better. One of the sort of our focus within Greater Manchester is being to build back better. In order for us to do that effectively, we need good leadership.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more about, being courageous and the emotional intelligence. And we've talked a lot in different discussions about empathy and the power of empathy. I'd also like to really, nod to all the nautical, sort of references in your intro there, having just been reconnected with the Royal Navy in a new position over the summer and over this period. I really appreciate, anchoring and navigation and all those kind of things. But clearly that's what I joined the Navy at 18, and that's absolutely where I started to learn and develop my own leadership traits. So thank you for bringing that back home, Sharon. And we really want to urge all of you on the conversation today, please join in the conversation, please join in, pop a message in the Q&A box, chat, network amongst yourselves as well, because I think that, Jane talked about collaboration, and there's a power in what we can learn from each other. So use the hashtag. We love a hashtag here at Northern Power Women. So we've got many. I am MPW, we are MPW, but we've also got human leadership and also MPW webinar. This webinar will also be going on YouTube as well, on our YouTube channel as well. So you can please do keep engaged with the conversation. And whilst we've started this Monday on a great lift, hanging out with you three wonderful individuals and leaders and our participants who've joined in the Zoom chat. But has there been anything that you've really learned about yourself over this period that has shocked you? And is there anything that you would have done differently? So anything that shocked you about you in leadership, and anything that has shocked you? Sharon, the camera's on you, so I'm coming straight to you.
So I think there's nothing that I would say has shocked me. And the reason why that's the case is because I've been on some journey of coaching myself, of development, of really understanding what my values are, what my triggers are, what my strengths are, where I need to develop. So it's not so much that I was shocked by what emerged and what came from me, how I responded or how I reacted as a result of the pandemic. I do have thought about what I would do differently, however. And what I certainly found was that in the wake of the pandemic, I started to just get into activity. So I just made activity synonymous with productivity, whereas they're not. And so the thing that I would do differently is actually be willing to rumble with the uncertainty and really be thinking more constructively about the actual steps that I need to take, as opposed to just reacting with what is coming up in the moment and just not thinking things through strategically. I just became very, very operational and just digging down and thinking activity meant that I was productive. And as a result, I felt that some decisions that I might have made I would have made them differently if there'd been more quality thinking put behind it. And I think that's what I'd do differently. I would give myself the time, the space to really think through my decisions, think about the direction that I want to go in, what my pivot might look like, as opposed to just reacting in the moment.
Thanks. And Jane, thank you, Sharon. Jane, what about yourself? Anything that you've learned about yourself or you would do differently?
You know, I was actually listening, you know, to both Louise and Sharon, and I'm going to admit to the fact I had a bit of a crisis of confidence throughout the last few months, with, you know, an enormous job, but also, as we said, you know, an enormous job at home. You know, I too had a daughter who went through her 18th birthday in the first lockdown, and, you know, I've probably spent the best amount of time with her over the last few months, but also having this, you know, huge job to manage, and, you know, and deploying all these people to home and making sure that they were all okay. And at one stage, I felt very overwhelmed, you know, and it taught me to probably take a step back. For those on the call from BNY Mellon and my daughter, who knows me very well, I am a bit like not a bull in a china shop, but I'm go all the time, wanting to get things done. And actually, I had to learn to take a step back a little bit and do a little bit of self-evaluation. That self-evaluation was to enable me to support others, to be perfectly honest with you. You know, I was fine within myself, but I didn't necessarily have the confidence that with this enormous job I have, this COVID situation, my 18-year-old daughter's world being turned upside down, that actually I would be able to deal with it. And, you know, you talk about collaboration and, you know, and communication and community spirit. BNY Mellon during the whole of this pandemic has been absolutely amazing to the leadership team and also our teams. There's been a lot of support that I have taken from the way that we have actually addressed things, you know, and when I do have a crisis of confidence, I feel that I can actually talk to people, and I've probably opened up a lot more than actually I ever thought I would do, to be absolutely honest with you. I'm quite a closed book, I'm quite private. And, you know, I've had to really deal with an enormous amount of, you know, of things, and, you know, like everybody has. And I'm not saying this is just me, but, you know, this confident woman became a little bit introverted at one stage and had to learn how to be slightly different.
And how did you get out of that? How did you work your way back into super confident Mondays?
Well, first of all, I had a word with myself and said, don't be so stupid, Jane, of course. You know, I actually am very lucky, and you know, and Simone, you know how much I love my daughter, but, you know, I also do have a very strong little role model that supports me. You know, for many of you who don't know, I'm actually a single mum and have been for a very long time. So we have a bond. But also, you know, what I did is, you know, I actually talked to my staff and to my team about I was struggling as well, you know, not just them. It wasn't a one-way thing. And actually, you know, I do these, you know, silly little things like all hands calls on a Friday where I have all my staff who come together, and we basically, you know, we just talk. And you know, I talk about the wonderful things that the guys have done, but I also talk about, you know, my personal, you know, my sort of, not my personal struggles, but my personal view on things. And I found that I was finding that connection that perhaps, you know, as a leader, sometimes you don't have. You know, I've never been one to sit in an ivory white tower, right? I am very hands-on and, you know, and really care. And actually, I kind of thought, you know what, they do care about me a little bit as well. And it was just, you know, a very kind of, you know, open, much more open relationship than perhaps I'd ever had.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you. Thanks for being so honest. And that's definitely coming across in the chat. Blimey O'Reilly, this is so great to hear this morning. Also a mum of an 18-year-old celebrating her birthday during lockdown and having all the angst with this, but also hearing the openness and warmth of sharing. So thank you. Lou, you talked about example before in your introduction. You know, it's not about the title, it's about examples. And I know also how passionate you are about the future generation. You are at United Utilities, you are as an individual passionate about that next gen. And our next generation have been massively impacted by this pandemic, whether it be exams, whether it's, you know, sort of furloughing of jobs, whether it's, you know, sort of feeling as though they've been limited. But there's certain leaders out there that seem to be like the new superheroes and rock stars. Jacinda Ardern, Kamala Harris. Why do you think it is so important to have these role models? Do you think, you know, should role models be understated? What do you think about this new style?
I think role models are really, really important. And you were involved with something with me recently when we were talking about our commitment in terms of social mobility here at United Utilities. And for me, this notion of to see it, to be it, you've got to see it. And I think that's the real benefit of role models is actually, I think the challenge to us as leaders is that people look to us and think we've got all the answers. And actually, I think that goes back to what Sharon said. You know, there is no rule book for COVID. None of us had really thought about it. We might have had pandemic at the top of our risk registers. You know, when we looked at the risk register, not really paid it that much attention. You know, it was there, but we'd never really thought about it. And then this whole thing happened. The world got sort of thrown upside down, and everybody looks to you as a leader to say, okay, so what do we do now? And I think that can be really exhausting. It can be really exhausting as a leader. You can put a huge amount of stress against yourself in terms of I need to have all of these answers. And I think to both what both Jane and Sharon said about the humility of sort of standing back and being really honest. And I think that's the importance about really, really good role models. And I think that those role models who are really effective are also those that are able to be honest, to be very clear that actually, you know, I'm feeling this too. I'm really struggling. I haven't got all of the answers. And actually that's equally as important as these fantastic role models. And I think there was a bit of a danger as well with these sort of superhero role models, because then that almost creates that energy of, to be successful, I have to be like that. And actually I might be having a bad day today. And I shared something with one of my direct reports team recently. You know, I'm a huge Dolly Parton fan. I think she's fantastic. Not only does I think she's great at party, but she's got this real simplistic view of the world, which just puts through. And she has a saying, and I have it up in my office, and it basically is, you want the rainbows, you've got to learn to walk in rain. And actually, it's that sense of, you know what, right now it's raining, it's tough, but actually better times will come. And I think the benefit of having great role models is that we can see how people do things differently. Because I think there's this real danger that actually I'm on my own, I'm alone making these decisions. And you know what? We're all struggling with these big issues. We're all struggling with how do we engage remote workforces. We're all struggling with what's the future of work going to look like. But also, we're also struggling, many of us as parents, because we're looking at the impact for our children or for friends and family members, and actually the turmoil they've been through, and actually what the future is going to look like for them. So I think role models are important, but also let's not underestimate, it's got to be the right role models, and let's not get carried away with this sort of superhero sense of actually being invincible. I think there also needs to be an honesty and a humility to our role models too. And especially for our young people and how we guide them through.
Thanks, Lou. And over the lockdown period, we held a number of power circles across all of the regions. I think it was over 1,000 hours, and we evaluated and launched a report back in September about levelling up. But one of the things when we first kind of came to gather those was because we wanted to firstly just check in with people, check in on the checkers, because as leaders, you're always constantly checking in on other people. And I think it's really important that we wanted to check in with those checkers. And there was one of our leaders on one of the power circles just said, do you know what? We all need to stop giving ourselves a hard time, because guess what? We are making history every day right now. We're making history with what we are doing, because this path hasn't been, tread before. So, I think it's really important that we have to, check in on each other, and there's that power of paying it forward. Sharon, I know you are somebody who's hugely generous of spirit and is really passionate about that sort of next generation. But why? How can we really look at the principles of paying it forward? How can we could all think, like you say, activity equals productivity, and how can we make the best of that? How can we really sort of pay that forward in this current climate to impact others for good?
For sure. I think you're an excellent example of that, actually, Simone, to that question. And I just mirror back exactly what I see of you. And one of the ways in which I think we can pay it forward is to think about why we should, first of all. And why we should, I personally think very much about legacy. So legacy is the vein which runs through every single thing that I do, the choices that I make, the things that I do or don't do. I think about what are the long-term consequences beyond me in this moment. And as I explained, I've got a daughter who's 22. I think about the world that she is living in. I think about the world that I want her to live in. And I think about the opportunities that I want her to have. And I understand that actually it's because somebody thought about me, they opened opportunities for me, they opened doors for me, and that's why I am where I am today. And therefore, what I do in the paying it forward is I think about the fact that someone led for legacy for me, and therefore I must lead for legacy for others. It's also the case, Simone, that I feel on a practical level, one of the ways that we can pay it forward is to allow other people to use the platform that we have. And that's one of the things that you do so aptly. You have created a platform and you enable voice for others. We can pay it forward in that way. And there's the obvious stuff as well around how we can use our connections, our networks, how we can share our experiences, all of that, paying it forward. But I think fundamentally for me, it's the why. Why should we? Because we want to ensure that the world that we've entered, we leave it better than the way we entered it. We want to ensure that our children experience things in a completely different way. We want to ensure, in particular as women, and of course me as a Black woman, I want to ensure that the challenges that I faced in pursuing my career, those coming behind me do not have to face those challenges. So paying it forward is about creating opportunity to ensure that the world is better for those who are coming behind us.
Thanks, Sharon. Jane, to you, in your the office in Manchester, you've got really supportive colleagues who absolutely passionate about paying it forward, working with the Salford Foundation, working on within mentoring and stuff like that. How have you been able to lead the business, through this and enable those, those people to be able to pay it forward to people who are in need right now?
I mean, I will say it's not been ideal. Obviously, probably the first couple of months of lockdown, actually from March through to, April, May, was very much, we had to focus on ourselves and the business to kind of just, get us through. But, the empathy of the firm still continues. And, I think we're very lucky. I mean, obviously, some of you will know we had, a new site leader, Denise Graham, who has taken over from Fergal. So continuing in his legacy, but also creating her own, which is just very, very interesting. Change is good. And actually in this environment, change is really good, because breathing a kind of, you know, a new, you know, view into Manchester. The leadership team of which, you know, I'm part of, has enabled us to think about things differently, you know, and just ensure that we continue the momentum. And I think I was slightly worried. I think, you know, during the early days of the pandemic that we would, you know, lose the momentum of all the fantastic work that we did. But we're continuing it. You know, we're focusing on things internally, but we're also continuing to focus externally. And I think, you know, that's the power of, it's the power of large organizations, but actually it's the power of the community, you know, in the firm and also outside, and, you know, our networks, as Sharon spoke to, and ensuring that, you know, we just keep going. You know, obviously the collaboration we have with yourselves is just going to be amazing, and there's so many great things to come. And, you know, I know, you know, obviously with my association with Northern Power Women, I'm terribly excited because finally we got there. But also on top of it, this is going to open up, you know, such an enormous amount of things for us to, you know, to focus on. And this isn't about, you know, BNY Mellon, right? This is about us as a large organisation in Manchester, you know, a great organisation in Manchester, being able to go out and being able to work with, you know, institutions, schools, universities, you know, all of the above, to really just ensure that, you know, from a diversity perspective, from an inclusion perspective, that we're absolutely nailing it. And I think, you know, as we come out, who knows what that's going to be, and you know, as we come out of this pandemic, but actually as we're in it, you know, just continuing and keeping going is one of the biggest achievements I think that we've all had.
Just keep on doing. And actually, I'm going to jump over to a question in the chat. Actually, Lou, if I can come to you, you know, on the chat and also on the Q&A. Thanks so much for your honesty. Has anyone else found, with the lack of connection within teams, that conflict has come up more than usual? And how has it been handled during lockdown? Has this been I'm sure there's got to be challenges, aren't there? It's not perfect every day, but have you dealt with this in isolation?
I think it's one of those things, isn't it? Is that, yeah, I think we've all, up until this point, underestimated the impact of personal interaction. So that sense of little things that can be dealt with quite quickly because of the way that we personally interact, because of the fact that we normally see each other or we can deal with something. And actually, I think what many people have found is that the real small things can sometimes become the huge things, because actually there isn't the sort of opportunity or architecture there to be able to deal with those things quite quickly. So before you know it, something that's really quite small can become huge, because there hasn't been that normal opportunity to sort of right set, if that makes sense. And I think it's about providing the opportunities and ensuring that just because people are working from home, or like many of us will have very fragmented workforces, some are still on site, some are still in call centres, some people are at home, and you very quickly can get to this level of it's not fair. So it's not fair that you can sit at home and work all day, but actually you expect me to come into work and operate that site. So it can lead very quickly to an us and them type of workforce, and I think you have to be very open and honest about that. You have to talk about the fact that exists. You have to make sure that you are personalizing your messages, but also it's really acknowledging actually the fact that those issues exist. I think there was a real danger at first about, well, it'll all settle down. I don't think it does. And I think as we go through each iteration of lockdown and potentially more into local lockdown measures, actually we've got to surface those issues and make sure there's really, really honest conversations. And I actually think that's the role of all leaders, but I also think that's the role that women leaders do much better in terms of that emotional intelligence, that ability to put through and to surface those issues. So I think it has been there, and I think it's been naturally there by that natural tension of the fact that people are working in a very different way. And I've heard it myself where people say, just because I'm at home, don't assume that, you know, I'm looking after my kids, or I'm you know, doing my supermarket shopping, or I'm doing X, Y, Z. It's equally tough for me because I'm struggling to disconnect work and home and those types of things. So I think this is where, for me, being customer services and HR director really helps. because in my customer world, looking after 7 million customers, I really segment my customer base. I understand how I understand their needs and target my communications. And actually, as leaders and also as HR professionals, we have to do the same because we're all different. And that's where personalization comes in. But we've got to expose this conflict. We've got to talk about it, and we've got to find ways of diffusing it quickly.
And Sharon talked about, the national campaign. They talk about building back better. I subscribe to building forward better or building future better, because I think we have an opportunity to build a new way of working. And it's not about throwing everything out that we've done before, but it's about taking some of this learning that we've had, the good, bad and the ugly, and taking it forward into new. Do you think your business has changed forever?
Yes. Oh, completely. And you know what? So on the really difficult days, I go, this is really hard. Stop now. Stop. I want to get off. This is just too hard. My business plan now looks like a completely different shape and flavour than anything that I'd ever envisaged. And then some days I go, do you know what? This is fantastic. I've seen innovation like I've never seen before. Let's send home thousands of employees to take telephone calls. Let's deploy new payment solutions, within a matter of a week. My last one took me 7 months to get in. So the level of innovation that we've seen and the ability to make decisions, and also this notion of failing fast, I think we've got better at. So let's give it a go. If it doesn't work, let's fail fast, let's learn quickly, and let's do something else. So if I stand back and I look at the level of innovation that's happened, we absolutely wouldn't want to lose that. But I also think there's something that's far more important, which is about humanity and humility. And actually, I often think that actually 2020 is probably the test. I'm not saying for 1 minute that we can ever undo the impact that COVID has had and the dramatic impact and the sad impact of many, many people losing their lives well before the time. But there is a bit of a reset. There's a much greater focus on what's important, on values-based leadership, on that sense of integrity and empathy, and doing things in the communities that we serve, whether that be additional employment programs or support for food banks like we've been doing and things like that. It's about focusing on building back future better. And actually, how do we take that learning that we're all going through right now and apply it so that we do look back? And our children do look back, and this is a period in time in history that they study and say, actually, they did do the right things, and it was the reset that we all needed.
And I totally agree with the innovation. I think people think going into the first lockdown, that was almost a kind of, gosh, we've got to mobilize the whole home working, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, everything else can go on hold. And I've seen some tremendous innovation going on over this period, and that innovation for good, which touches on all the things we've talked about paying it forward, about supporting our future generations, including the carousel mentoring that we've done out on the road, with young people, bringing role models to young people, bringing it to life. We cannot cut this oxygen off now. I'm going to throw over into the chat and the Q&A. I've got a mixture of both, so please keep the comments coming. Thank you so much, Sharon. We've got quite a few to get through, so I'm going to sort of go quick fire on some of these. I'm going to try anyway. Sharon, do you believe coaching is an important vehicle to drive senior managers, executives to ensure the human approach is used in leadership delivery?
Thanks for the question, Simone. It's actually Bill Gates who said that every leader needs a coach. And for someone of that stature to be making that sort of declaration, I think that's quite telling. So in answer to the question, without a doubt, most definitely now, it's often said that leadership is lonely at the top. It's lonely at the top. And even where you have a more collaborative way of working, there are those times where you'll have your own private fears. It's been made mention of by Jane that there was a time where she had a crisis of confidence, and that certainly in the work that I do, I'm hearing a lot. And being able to find that safe space where there's no judgment about the concerns, the issues, the challenges that you have, being able to think through the decisions that you might be having to make, having that space to be able to do so with a thinking partner right now, I feel is more invaluable than at any other time. And it's in those spaces, certainly from what I'm seeing, that we start to have the birthing of quality thinking in order to then lead on by extension to quality decision making. So for sure, now is the time to really think about where you can get that additional support from to help as you're managing crisis continually.
I'm a big fan of that, asking for help. You know, people are, you know, want to help, and people want to do something for someone else. And I think the sum of all those parts, I think that's where that magic can happen, you know, and we really benefit. Jane, coming to you, how do you motivate your teams when they may be struggling with working from home and everything that is going on with the lockdowns and the uncertainty?
So, really interesting question. And I think something that, you know, we talk about a change in leadership and the human leadership side. That is one thing that really, as leaders, we've had to probably focus on more than anything. You know, our technology is excellent. We can get through the day, albeit the volumes have been mad, but, you know, we can get through the day. It's really the, you know, the people and the aspect of the motivation and the way we do it, which has changed. I do some very silly things that may you know, may not be, you know, appreciated by some, but are certainly appreciated by others, which, you know, I do lots of quotes. You know, I talk about the importance of members of teams, and I'm just going to, you know, sort of read you my favorite one, which I do regurgitate and they're getting quite bored of at the moment, which is coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success. And that to me is the epitome of, you know, of teams and how we should be working together. Motivating them has probably been the hardest thing. You know, one of the things I think actually that Louise mentioned was, you know, this getting away from it at home. You know, you literally walk to a room, you know, and you walk out of that room, and how do you actually switch off? Now, I'm probably the worst person in the world to actually say, you know, this is how I switch off. But one of the things I've been doing with the guys is, you know, is really simple. You're at home. It doesn't mean that you can't have lunch. You don't have to sit at your PC for 10 hours a day. You can go and have lunch. You can go and have a run. You can go and walk your dog. You can go and sit downstairs. It's okay. Nobody's going to basically shout at you because you're not at your PC for half an hour of the day, you know, and it's really that mentality. I think people assume that because they were working from home, they had to be sitting here all day, every day. And they were really struggling to get away from it and really struggling to switch off. And I was getting a lot of questions about how I do it. And, you know, right now, I'm a celebrity. That's what does it for me. Watching something really, really rubbish on TV that I can literally just switch my brain off and just watch some rubbish, you know, and I close the door, you know, I close the door to my office. I don't go back in. That's one of the things that I do. And I've been trying to keep the teams going with that and ensuring that they really, really get that break, because that motivation as a leader, showing people that you understand in this environment, you absolutely get it. You absolutely understand that there are pressures of working from home, but keeping them going is, you know, it's an art, right? It's not a science, it's an art. And that's an art that I think we've all probably learned.
Absolutely, and I think that's where this is one of the things I think we can take down is presenteeism. So from, you know, it's not about looking at that green button on somebody's live screen or whatever. It's absolutely, and to Sharon's point, you know, activity and productivity. It doesn't mean the same thing. Lou, I'm back to you. Thank you, Jane. Lou, so you're getting high fives for getting Dolly, you know, mentioned in, and I've equally written Dolly down because, you know, Dolly rocks. You got extra points, by the way. I'd like to ask, how do we help in this new virtual world expose our future leaders to those authentic role models who are potentially now less visible now they're working at home?
So I think it's about exposing those acts of human kindness for me. and how do you celebrate those leaders that are going above and beyond? Because actually, you know, and actually, how do you empower them to do so? We introduced something called UUSOS. One of the things I'm really mindful in my role is, you know, I talk a lot, as you know, about deprivation and the impact of the Northwest, and actually the fact that actually we've got some of the highest deprivation in our region than anywhere else in the country. And I see that day in, day out in terms of my interactions with customers. But actually, why do we think our own employees are really different? So actually, our own employees, while they may have great employment with us or with BNY Mellon or many of the other organisations who are on the phone, actually that isn't the sense of what may be going on in their families. So actually, you know, people are experiencing genuine financial difficulty as part of that unit. So actually, how do we help leaders to reach out and provide support into that family unit? Whether that be support with some counselling support, whether that be access to food banks, whether that be access to financial support, as well as sort of budgeting and managing money. But also we've introduced something called UUSOS, that if families have got themselves into significant financial difficulty as a result of the situation, that they can reach out and get that help and support. And what I've been really impressed with is those line managers who are out there doing some really difficult tasks, that actually have noticed, have used that level of emotional intelligence to understand that actually, Simone, you know what, I know that you're struggling at the minute and you're probably going to the food bank. So actually, what can we do discreetly and confidentially to help you? And actually, that's really hard, because then how do I make a hero of the fact that, you know what, you're going above and beyond in terms of supporting your team. But it's about making sure that actually the people who need to know that you're providing that additional level of support. Because I think it's really easy that we make heroes again about those people who are fighting the fires and leading from the front. And actually, there is a wealth of middle and junior leaders who are doing an amazing job. And actually, I think it's about how do we empower them to make sure that they're supporting their teams, which is absolutely critical right now. And more importantly, how do we make sure that we reward what I call that element of human leadership? And we'll see that come back. We will see this probably next year. We will see this in our employee engagement surveys. We will see it in our retention surveys. We will see it in those form of data that will help us really pinpoint actually where that's all been happening and happening really, really well. And I think it's going to be really interesting to triangulate some of that, what I call immediate feedback data, with some of those fantastic leaders out there that are doing a great job.
And it becomes part of the legacy, Lou, I think, doesn't it, as well? I think that's, you know, I think there's definitely an element of this, is how organisations are going to be thought of as we navigate through to whatever the other side and the new norm is. Is that legacy impact as well is important?
I think that, and Sharon talks about legacy. I think legacy is huge. And I think, you know, we haven't got a rule book. There is no rule book on COVID. And so I'd go back to those values. And I love what Sharon said about legacy. But, you know, if I think about it in terms of when we make decisions as leaders, it's got to be around, you know, integrity. Are we doing the right thing? Can we look ourselves in the mirror? Can we say, actually, we think that that's the right decision? It's considered everybody that's impacted individually. It's about empathy. It's about innovation. But that whole legacy piece of around doing the right thing, and you know, it's really interesting. And I go back to see it, you know, to be it, you've got to see it. So we've recently done something where our board and executives decided to give up 20% of their pay. We weren't asked to, but basically we recognise we're providing a monopoly service here in the Northwest, and many people are impacted by furlough. So we gave that salary up because it felt like the right thing to do. There was no pressure, and we gave 600,000 meals to the food bank here in the Northwest. It was really interesting because we were inundated by frontline employees who said we want to do the same thing, and straight away started to make that contribution to the food bank. Not because it was something we asked them to do, but that sense of actually, wow, I can see people doing things. And what was really interesting was we didn't say how we'd funded the food bank. We just said, we got together, we funded the food bank, and people went, well, how have you done that? And when we explained, and we hadn't made a fanfare of done it, I come back to what I said right at the beginning about it's about taking action, it's about being an example. People instantly said, can I follow? And I think it's that sense of legacy and what is it we're doing as leaders that generates that catalyst for others to follow.
Absolutely. Sharon, I'm coming to you, and I'm sort of, we've got a question here, which is, and I'm conscious we're really getting into wrapping up time, and I don't want to, but it's something that Lou said, which is, leadership is not about grade or title, it's about your actions and setting positive examples. The question is, how do you disseminate this way of thinking throughout organizations and reach out to those with their older views of leadership? Get rid of the dinosaurs, Sharon, how do we do it?
Well, do you want the legal way or the illegal way?
It's a Monday. Let's go rogue.
So I think Louise just shared the most compelling, beautiful example. One thing for sure that we know about leadership is that it acts as a thermostat, right? That it sets the temperature in an organization. It really shapes what's deemed acceptable and what isn't acceptable, what's tolerated and what isn't tolerated, really becomes our culture. And I think the way in which we disseminate is to amplify and bring visibility to the good stories, the good examples where people are doing well, where people are leading well. We celebrate those, we highlight those, we raise awareness of those, because what that then tells other people is that this is how we do this here. This is how we work together here. This is our signpost toward that which is good. And I think within any organization, what will start to happen is for those who don't sit alongside that which is celebrated and recognized and honored, there'll become a dissonance. And it'll become clear that that's not the place where they belong. And I feel just over time, being consistent, celebrating that which is good, being clear about what is and isn't acceptable, and amplifying good stories will in due course start to allow people to find whether or not they belong. And those behaviors that aren't aligned, they'll soon emerge and become rejected by others.
Thanks, Sharon. And I'm getting to the point of having to come to an end of this, and I really don't want. I feel like this is chapter 1, ladies. Who's in for chapter 2? Yeah, there's so much conversation in the chat, which we'll take away and look at. We'll follow up this conversation with a blog and takeaways as well. But while I'm sort of wrapping up, I just want to throw that I'm going to come back to each of you with what is your leadership superpower. So 1 or 2, okay? So I'm going to come back to you in a minute, but I just want to thank all of you for joining in the conversation today. I want you to keep the conversation going because this is important. We cannot go back. We have to look at how we build future better. We have to keep paying it forward. We have to use leadership as a thermostat, and we have to make sure that, it is not about those titles, it's about the examples that we're making, and it's about that collaboration. So I want a big thank you to all of you who've joined. I want a big thank you to BNY Mellon who have enabled this to happen today. But to each of you, what's your leadership superpower? I'm going to come to Lou. Lou, you first.
Right. I'm going to go with 2 because I think they're equally important. The first is listening, and the second is passion.
Wow, thank you. Sharon?
I would say one of mine is resilience. I bounce back after setback, and that's a real strength of mine. And also vision. I always have a sense of grounded hope, that there's always prospect for a brighter future. So a visionary leader is what I think is one of my strengths as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And Jane?
So can I have 3, if that's okay?
Go for it.
So I think, and I would never have actually admitted this, but I'm human. That's what I've learned. I've learned that through this human leadership view. I have become much more humane in my approach. I am massively passionate about what I do and how I do it. And that's not just about my job. That's just about everything. It's about us. It's about the world in general. And then finally, I want to be hopeful that what we've been through has taught us an awful lot, okay? And we talk about playing it forward. We have to learn from our mistakes. We have to learn that we need to, love each other. We need as a community, as a business. I know love isn't allowed in the business world. You're not allowed to say those kind of things. But frankly, we've got to care, and we've got to really change. We've said everybody needs a leader, everybody needs a mentor, everybody needs a role model. We absolutely do. We also have to remember it's not all about leaders. It's about those people that keep the lights on for us. And sometimes we forget them. And I think that's, really important. I'll stop now. Otherwise I'll get too emotional.
Not at all. I've enjoyed listening to you. I've enjoyed your passion, your resilience, your hope, your vision. Please keep the lights on. Please keep the water flowing as well out there as well. But thank you so much for joining today's conversation. Thank you to all of you who have joined in the chat. We will go through this, we will look, and we will try and respond in some way to some of these conversations, because I know some questions are still answered. But thank you, my stellar panel today. Thank you to Jane Woods, thank you to Lou Beardmore, and thank you to Sharon Amesu. Keep the conversation going. #NPW webinar, #human leadership. You've been very welcome. We've been so grateful to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.